The night he almost died was the night she realized her heart no longer belonged to her. Arya stood in the doorway of the dimly lit hospital hallway, the scent of antiseptic thick in the air, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she watched the man she had loved in silence for years fight for his life behind a glass window. Damien Moretti, untouchable, unreadable, feared by many and loved by none, had finally been brought to his knees, and the world suddenly felt too fragile, too sharp, too painfully real. Arya had always known he lived between shadows and danger, but seeing him bloodied and unconscious shattered something inside her. It stripped away the distance she had forced between them for so long. In that moment, with her heart pounding so hard it hurt, she realized she would choose him every single time, even if he never chose her back. If you believe in kindness, healing, and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to channel name. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Arya had worked for Damien for 5 years, long enough to understand how power shaped him. He led his empire with a cold, flawless discipline that intimidated most people into silence. She had entered his world as a quiet assistant, organizing schedules, handling documents, and ensuring the chaos around him never touched his desk. To many, she was invisible, just another employee lost in the shadows of the powerful. But she saw him differently. Beneath the strength and detachment, she often caught glimpses of something raw in his eyes when he thought the world wasn't looking, loneliness, exhaustion, and a heaviness he carried alone. Her love for him grew in places he never looked, quiet and endless, a light she kept hidden because she knew he would never accept it. Damien had once told her, in a rare moment of vulnerability, that he could never allow himself to love. In his world, love was a weakness exploited by enemies and punished by fate. Arya respected that boundary, even when it broke her. She stayed by his side because it felt like she was meant to, even if her feelings would never be returned. Her love was steady, unspoken, and painfully patient. But with each passing year, she felt herself sinking deeper into the truth. She could not live without him, even in silence. She watched him take on burdens that hardened him, watched him lose friends, watched him build walls around himself that even sunlight could not pass through. She wanted to reach for him, to offer him the warmth he denied himself, but she never dared. She chose to love him quietly, from a place where he wouldn't have to carry the weight of her heart. Everything changed the night of the attack. Damien had gone to negotiate a deal that Arya had sensed was wrong from the beginning. She had begged him, with trembling hands and a voice she tried to keep steady, not to go alone. She had seen something in the reports that suggested betrayal. But Damien, stubborn and used to surviving the impossible, brushed off the warning and ordered her to stay behind. Arya spent the entire night restless, pacing, unable to shake the dread curling in her stomach. And then the call came. A gunfight. A betrayal. Damien down. Emergency transport. Critical condition. She didn't remember how she got to the hospital. All she remembered was the numbness that hollowed her chest when she saw him unconscious and pale, stripped of his armor, stripped of his silence. She stood there for hours, refusing to leave, her heart beating with a quiet desperation she could no longer hide from herself. She realized how much she had lost by loving him quietly. She realized how much she wanted to stay, even in the shadows, as long as it meant he lived. When Damien finally woke up days later, Arya was there. He didn't look at her with confusion or frustration. Instead, he stared at her with a depth she had never seen before, as if he was remembering every moment she had stayed, every moment he had pushed her away, and every moment he had chosen the world over the fragile connection he was too afraid to acknowledge. He said nothing because he didn't need to. The gravity in his eyes told her he understood more than she had ever intended him to. The weeks after the attack forced them into a strange intimacy. Damien was unable to return to his full duties, and Arya became his anchor, helping him walk, managing his business from the safety of his penthouse, making sure he took medication, and giving him the warmth he had never asked for. Her presence filled the silent rooms of his home with a gentle rhythm. She cooked simple meals, opened the curtains to let in morning light, and brought life into his world in ways he didn't know he needed. Something about the quiet domesticity between them made Damien restless. He watched her more closely. He noticed the softness in her smile, the tenderness in the way she arranged his pillows, the way her eyes lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking. He sensed the affection she had buried so deeply it hurt to see. And he hated that he had been blind to it for years. He tried to distance himself, retreating into the hardened persona he had mastered. But every time he pushed her away, she returned, not with desperation, not with demands, but with a quiet strength that disarmed him. She brought him tea when he winced in pain. She organized his files with steady hands. She moved around him with a grace that felt like home. Damien found himself unraveling, piece by piece, until he could no longer pretend he didn't feel something burning in his chest every time she touched the edge of his sleeve. The breaking point came late one night during a heavy rainstorm. A rival group had attempted to ambush his location earlier that day, and the security breach left Damien infuriated and tense. He snapped at his guards, barked commands, and paced the living room in a storm more violent than the weather outside. Arya approached him gently, offering a report and a cup of warm tea, but he ignored the documents and focused entirely on her. She tried to walk past him, but he stepped forward. The room felt electric with unspoken words. She had never seen him look so conflicted, so raw, so fiercely determined. He cornered her, not with force, but with the intensity of a man who had finally reached the limits of his denial. Arya froze, breathless, watching the shadows and light fall across his face as he stared at her with the truth he had kept buried for years. Damien had always denied himself the luxury of emotion, denied the possibility of tenderness, denied the comfort of belonging. But standing inches away from her, he found himself unable to deny her. She felt her heart pounding, unable to speak, unable to move, terrified of what he might say and terrified of hearing nothing at all. The closeness awakened every hidden feeling she had tried to bury. The air between them tightened, and Arya felt tears sting her eyes before she could stop them. She didn't want him to see her heart break, but he saw everything, every sacrifice, every silent love, every wound she carried in her chest. Damien lifted his hand hesitantly, as if touching her might shatter the last boundary he had clung to. When his hand finally brushed her cheek, the truth in his touch was devastating. He wasn't asking for permission. He was claiming what he had once been too afraid to want. And in that moment, Arya felt everything inside her collapse into a single, overwhelming truth: he loved her too, and he had loved her longer than he'd ever admit. In the days that followed, Damien's transformation was slow, vulnerable, and deeply human. He allowed Arya into his world in ways he never had before. He spoke to her about his fears, his past, the weight of leadership, and the shadows that had chased him his entire life. He confessed that he had noticed her kindness from the very beginning but had convinced himself he didn't deserve it. Arya listened to him with the quiet patience she'd always carried, and Damien realized he had never truly been seen by anyone the way she saw him. He found himself wanting to protect her not as his employee, not as someone in his circle, but as someone he could not imagine losing. Together, they faced the enemies who had tried to destroy him. Arya used her intelligence and resourcefulness to help uncover the betrayal that led to the attack. Damien relied on her insights in ways he had never relied on anyone before. Their bond grew stronger under pressure, forged by trust and unspoken devotion. The people in Damien's world noticed the shift. The man who had once enforced a cold distance now carried a gentleness in his expressions whenever Arya was near. And although danger still circled them, neither of them doubted the strength they found in each other. Eventually, when the worst threats had passed and Damien regained full control of his empire, he made a choice his entire life had warned him against. He chose love. He chose Arya. He chose the quiet steadiness she offered, the warmth that brought life back into his days, and the hope that softened even the sharpest edges of his world. He chose to build a future with her, one brick at a time, one confession at a time, one heartbeat at a time. By the time Arya realized she was no longer loving him in silence, Damien had already whispered his devotion into every